welcome to a very special 2-hour episode of Wreckers Hotline Drag Racing 98. On today's show we've got the Konica Winternationals. This has grown into the largest drag racing event held anywhere in the world outside of North America. We've got 521 competing teams from all over Australia and overseas packing in here to Willowbank Raceway for the Winter Nats. Now joining me is my fellow commentator Paul Kasos. Paul, already early on race day, the crowds are pouring in. We could be heading for a record.
Well, Robert, wouldn't surprise me. Last year at the Winter Nationals we had 33,500 people, but this year race fans from all over Australia and New Zealand are heading here. It wouldn't surprise me if we get as many as 40,000 here this weekend.
Well, we've had 2 days of qualifying already in unusually mild conditions, normally a lot colder at this time of the year at Willowbank Raceway. But here on race day, the westerly winds have sprung up, and Paul, I think it could get quite cold tonight. That could be good for the engines.
Well, the Winter Nationals, Willowbank in winter really means horsepower, and it wouldn't surprise me if that magic 300 miles per hour mark in top fuel was broken.
Well, staying on top of that story and all of the information that's going to come out of the pits will be Tanya Campbell. And of course, the guy the racers want to see down in the braking area is Chris Diggles. If he goes to them with a microphone, they've won their run. Well, before we get into racing, let's have a look back at the very best of the qualifying from the last 2 days. With 521 entries, qualifying for the Konica Winternationals got underway early on the Friday for the Sportsman classes. All the professional categories hit the track for the first time that evening. The strength of this Friday night qualifying session for everything from Superformance Top Doorslammer right through to High-Tech Oil's Top Fuel attracts a larger crowd each year. A lot of spice was added to Top Fuel qualifying by the prospect of Australia's first 300 mile an hour speed, as Tanya Campbell reports.
Here at Wreckers Hotline Drag Racing 98, we'd almost grown bored talking about the possibility of the first Australian 300 mile an hour pass. That was until two things happened. Firstly, we saw the entry list for the Konica Winternationals. It includes 4 teams who have already run 297 mile an hour or better. And secondly, major mobile crane operator and top fuel owner Santo Rapisada of Santos Cranes is adding a little bit of spice to the chase. He's offering $20,000 bonus check to the team who is first to 300 mile an hour. Now, most top fuel drivers are keen enough to have their name go down in drag racing history, but $20,000, well, that's a whole lot of extra incentive. Now, obviously Santo is hoping that his driver, Glen Mikres, will be the first to reach that 300 mile an hour barrier and win his money back.
It might be a question of the first guy down the racetrack today, so it's really hard to say. I mean, we're going to hopefully be there. We'll hopefully be the first one, but I mean, there's a lot of cars now that are real close, so it's a race to beat. Who's in line first, probably.
For some time now, Graeme Cowin in the Shell Rocket Industries dragster has shown the power to run 300 mile an hour, but he just hasn't managed to put it all together over the quarter mile.
The car's been consistently quick to half track. I think we got the speed record to half track at 2:55, but theoretically we need to pick up another 50 mile an hour on the other half, and we haven't been able to do that, so we're still a bit behind the 8 ball, but if we do, obviously we'll run well over 300.
Well, most of Australia has been closely watching the battle between Cowin and Mikres for that first 300 mile an hour pass. The battlefield has certainly opened up somewhat. Darren DiFillipo is in with a big chance. His car ran 298 mile an hour at the TAC Nationals in March, and that's the fastest time recorded so far this season. Jim Reed, of course, is back, and his new Wins dragster has a 300 plus engine combination, and despite his year away from racing, he's a big chance to upstage. Don't discount Romeo Capitaneo in the Sidchrome Proto Fueler. His crew chief and brother John Capitaneo knows how to make horsepower, and they'll have their eyes focused on that $20,000. It doesn't matter who is out there running. If that 300 mile an hour bonus goes off, you know the team that earns it is definitely going to work for that paycheck. And you're going to see a time of around 4.8 seconds or better down the quarter mile to achieve that 300 mile an hour time. That works out to about, 4 seconds, $20,000, around $18 million an hour. Now, where can I get a job like that?
The Santos Cranes $20,000 bonus created a mad scramble to be first into the staging lanes for Friday night's High-Tech Oil's Top Fuel qualifying session. First in line were Jim Reed and Graeme Cowin, both determined to have a real shot at the 300 mile an hour barrier. Cowin's horsepower turned a tyre shake and he shut off as Reed clicked it a little early for a 5.13.
Next up were two young guns in the form of Darren DiFillipo and Terry Sainty. DiFillipo's True Flow exhaust team were pretty pumped up about their chances after running 298 mile an hour at the TAC Nationals. That's 477 kilometres an hour.
Terry Sainty smoked the tyres straight off the line, but DiFillipo was looking good. A 4.96 sent him straight to number one, while Sainty would have to wait until Saturday for another chance to put the Eagle Leads car higher up the ladder. Take a look at this on the replay for a clean straight run from DiFillipo. The exhaust header flame's almost perfect before he shuts it off just a little before the line.
American Glen Mikres was very confident about his chances in Santo Raposada's car. The team went to the start line with plenty of power dialed into the combination. Robin Kirby, on the other hand, was more intent on making a clean pass and establishing a baseline. Conditions were near perfect at Willowbank, with plenty of traction for either Mikres to monster the strip or Kirby to finesse it.
Neither produced what they wanted though, as Mikres left first but aborted early with problems, while Kirby had troubles of his own. Kirby did, however, win the coasting battle to the finish line to grab the higher qualifying spot. On the Wreckers Hotline replay, we can see how little time both drivers actually spent on the throttle. So after Top Fuel qualifying session 1, Darren DiFillipo on top with a 4.96 from Reed, Cowin, Kirby, Mikres and Sainty. Not very representative of what Top Fuel can be yet, but there was another 2 sessions to come. After a full day's action from the Sportsman classes, Saturday's spectacular Nestle Night of Thunder was opened with a special cake cutting ceremony to mark Queensland Day. The honours were performed by Ipswich Deputy Mayor Denise Hanley in front of a number of sponsors and dignitaries. Then we launched into the final 2 qualifying sessions for the professional classes.
Travel Air Tour's top alcohol, Harold Campbell was trying to qualify the only altered of the 11 cars entered in the class. Steve Parker had his funny car in the other lane and got to go on his own when Campbell was shut down behind the line.
Parker has been very consistent in the funny car and on this pass came up with a solid 5.85 seconds for a good spot in the field.
Top alcohol standouts Stephen Reed in the funny car and Gary Phillips in the dragster were the next to the line. Phillips was well down the field after a trouble run on Friday night, but already had the points on board to wrap up yet another national championship.
In the near-perfect conditions, both cars left hard. Phillips blasting back to number 1 with a 5.82. Reed stepped up the top speed mark to 390 kilometres an hour and grabbed 5th qualifying spot.
After briefly flirting with a big block, Mark Brew had the small block Chevy engine back in the BOC Gases dragster for the Konica Winternationals. He was determined to qualify against his much larger engined opponents.
Paul Shackleton was having troubles beside him, but Brew ran through in 6.24 seconds to hold down 8th position, the bump spot. David Glenwright had set the early pace on Friday night in Bob Brackham's Romac dragster with a 5.829 second pass. His attempt to regain the number 1 from Gary Phillips though sounded off song and ended in broken conrods as the engine exploded deep in the braking area.
Tanya Campbell's brother Harold was down to one last chance to qualify as the Nestle Night of Thunder wound down, but this huge burnout ended against the wall and put paid to his chances of making the field.
Also on the outside looking in as the final session unfolded was Pommy Steve Reed. He needed to better a 6.24 to bump out Mark Brew. Comfortable in the other lane was Paul Shackleton, who already had a 5.94 on the board. Reed's 6:26 was close, but not close enough. So at the completion of qualifying for Travel Air's top alcohol, we've got Gary Phillips on top, followed by David Glenwright, Steve Harker, Wayne Newby, Australian Stephen Reed, Paul Shackleton, David Hawke and Mark Brew.
Last few weeks, and that the last qualifier we did.
In Superformance Top Doorslammer, all eyes were on Victor Bray. Could the 3 times Australian champion win his first Konica Winternationals, or would his big event jinx strike again?
Bray certainly signalled his intentions right throughout qualifying. Here he belts out a 6:35 in the first session of the Nestle Night of Thunder, as Adelaide's Dave Coop uses a 6:84 to anchor the field in 8th position.
Sydney siders Rob Broadbent and Ben Gatt both made the trek to the Konica Winternationals. Broadbent with a new Holden Statesman, while Gatt was behind the wheel of his Falcon.
Like everybody, they were feeling the pressure through the Nestle Night of Thunder. The huge crowd were lapping it up as racer after racer fought to qualify. Gatt's 680 was good enough to make the field, but Broadbent's 691 fell just short.
Victor Bray's Castrol teammate Michael King was showing some good form in the 57 custom line, but Gary Caulfield was struggling to get on top of his new Holden. With 12 cars trying to squeeze into 8 places, he was running out of chances.
King left hard and was arrow straight as he made sure there were 2 Castrol cars in Superformance Top Doorslammer with a solid 6:64 to be midfield.
Andrew Searle won himself plenty of fans on the Summit Doorslammer Tour. His Acme fiberglass custom line ran consistently in the mid-6s throughout qualifying, including this 6:63 during the Nestle Night of Thunder.
A great example of the determination of racers to be part of the Konica Winternationals would have to be Adelaide's Lou Rochella. Despite not really showing the pace needed for a spot in the top 8, he towed all the way from South Australia. It was fantastic to see him rewarded with a personal best, even if unfortunately it didn't quite put him in the field.
Louis Rochella all the way up from Adelaide with the big Chevy Bel Air. Mate, your first 6-second pass. We thought you'd be happy.
Yeah, that's excellent. We've been trying for a long time now to run a 6.
Amazingly, big meeting specialist Peter Gratz still was not in the Superformance Top Doorslammer field going into the last run of qualifying. Although he only needed to better a 6:91 for a spot in eliminations, he couldn't afford any mistakes on his last-ditch effort against Michael King.
Neither Gratz nor his Valvoline 57 Chevy put a foot wrong, and he stormed to a 6:40 to make his appointment to race on Sunday.
Victor Bray, we've had to wait to the last qualifying pass in Top Doorslammer. Peter Gratz couldn't get your 6:33, your number 1 qualifier.
Yeah, like I say, tomorrow's the day that you have to be the winner. And Gratzy's had a little bit of trouble in qualifying. It's a pretty smart move. He's a very smart racer. He comes out. He probably could have had a go at going a bit faster if he really wanted to. A 40's not far off the pace. I think it probably puts him in number 2 spot. And he probably was a little bit conservative there on purpose. Like I say, he's a smart racer. You know he had to get into the field, put himself in the field in his last shot. That's all he had to do.
Superformance Top Doorslammer qualifying, and not unexpectedly Victor Bray in number 1, but it's Shane Elcote in number 2. Then Peter Gratz, Andrew Searle, Michael King, Les Winter, Ben Gatt and Dave Coop. Nowhere was qualifying tougher than John William Auto Sales Pro Stock. Going into the Nestle Night of Thunder, Peter Ridgway headed a record 17 drivers trying to make the top 8. Rookie John Andropoulos was out to show his TAC Nationals runner-up finish was no flash in the pan.
Ridgway had run twice in the 7.7s already in the VPW Oldsmobile and was obviously not concerned about reaction times, as he added a 7.72 on this run to cement his top spot ahead of Andropoulos' 7.84.
Ridgway's VPW teammate Bruno Cogneto had every intention of making it a qualifying 1-2 with his recently landed Oldsmobile. With 17 cars trying to qualify, Adelaide's Jerry Parenti would have been happy with just about any position in the field. Cogneto hit the target with a strong 7.76 to grab second, but Parenti languished back in 11th with his 7.99.
Defending Australian champion Joe Polito still had a chance of retaining his title in the Dynamax Ford Probe. He needed to qualify well and hope his rival Rob Tucker had problems. During the Nestle Night of Thunder, he laid down a strong 7.787 to signal his intentions.
Brisbane's Rob Tucker came to the Konica Winternationals with a 45-point championship lead in the Performance Wholesale Oldsmobile ahead of Polito. Listen to Tucker rev this engine to near 10,000 RPM as he works the 5-speed gearbox. .789, 2 thousandths behind Polito.
Mark Machete was another racer desperate to make the field, while South Australian Rob Quattrocchi was looking fairly likely to be around on Sunday.
A final session 7.79 landed Quattrocchi in 5th spot, but Machete still had his problems.
The man making the great leap forward in Pro Stock recently has been Craig Hasted. His Craiger Performance Usher Constructions Thunderbird has slashed its times to be a major force.
Hasted became the 6th driver of the event into the 770s with a 7.79. Competition for a spot in the field became even more intense as the final session of Nestle Night of Thunder progressed.
Kim Petterwood continued to hang on to 8th spot in the Lifestyle Pontiac with this 7.86, while John O'Carney in the John William Auto Sales Pontiac missed out with a 7.95.
How tough was the field? How about this? Tony Wedlock's fighting 7.89 made him the quickest non-qualifier in Pro Stock history. Now that's tough. 17 cars had come down to just 8, headed by Peter Ridgway, the quickest Pro Stock field in history.
Over the last 20 years or so, one of the best known names in Australian drag racing has been Winfield Jim Reed. Supported with major sponsorship from the Rothmans Company over this period, Reed has won more Australian titles than any other racer alive. With new laws forcing the end of the tobacco company sponsorship at the end of 1995, Reed found himself without a major sponsor for the first time in his Top Fuel career. Now, despite this, he contested the full 1996 season with great success while seeking a replacement sponsor. In tough economic conditions and an incredibly competitive sponsorship market, no major corporate backer was found, and Reed just ran a limited campaign last year, culminating with his runner-up finish at what he describes as his favourite event, the Konica Winternationals. Now, Jim hasn't raced since, but thanks to the backing of Wins, makes a return to the track this weekend, unable to stay away from Australia's premier event.
Well, we've been running at the Winter Nationals now since the mid-70s, I suppose, in the Top Fuel car, the old Surfers Paradise track. I believe we've competed at 16, we've won 10, runner-up at 4. I think the other 2 were match races, so our record's pretty good. So we figured we got a good shot here tonight.
Now, if you think Jim Reed might be at a disadvantage after a year away, think again. His Wins Dragster now features the very latest in Top Fuel engine technology after a shopping trip to the USA to prepare for this event.
Oh, I think any of the 8 cars that are here on their day can run 300, but you must remember, track conditions come into it, the weather comes into it. It's not just the equipment. Some of the best drivers in the United States don't qualify at times, so that should really answer your question. On its day, yes, it'll run 300.
Jim Reed is certainly back and looks determined to make sure his Top Fuel opponents get to know all about it.
And it was Jim Reed and Graeme Cowin who were the first to the line again in the opening session of Saturday's Nestle Night of Thunder. This time it was Reed with the early problems, before Cowin fireballed an engine through the finish line.
Robin Kirby lined the Pennzoil Dragster up against Glen Mikres in the Sandoz Cranes car, again with both hoping for better things than their day one performances. That $20,000 bonus was also still up for grabs.
Mikres had to lift for a moment and Kirby had an exhaust come adrift, but both drove through the lights for a 5.12 and a 5.14 respectively.
In the final session of Hi-Tech Oil's Top Fuel qualifying, Terry Sainty was still after a representative time and Jim Reed was once again loaded for bear. Reed knew he had the hardware for getting the combination right to handle the cold, dense air, and superb traction was proving to be tough. This time, the car left hard but drifted to the centre line, hitting the 1,000-foot timers at over 250 miles an hour.
Look. So much for only having sponge in the middle of the track, you guys. Hey?
Hey, just as well.
Bit of sponge didn't do that. I want to know what they had holding down the lights.
Just double-sided tape.
With Graeme Cowin in the Shell Rocket Industries dragster and Glen Mikres in the Santos Cranes car, both determined to be the first to 300, the final qualifying pass of Top Fuel was always going to be dramatic. We just didn't realise how dramatic. Cowin's car suddenly turned left and climbed the wall. A wheel had come adrift and Cowin was slammed back to earth before crossing the track to hit the opposite safety barrier. In replay, watch how suddenly Graeme Cowin finds himself out of control. In slow motion from the front, we see the car lurch high in the air and miraculously it didn't barrel roll as it spins. Amateur footage shot from the grandstand provides another dramatic view.
What happened? What happened? The wheel came off. Tore the centre out of the wheel. And everything happened really quick.
Okay though?
I had my old buddy Mick with me. Now my mate Mick got shot 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
Well, he's riding here with me, so he saved me. Thanks, Mick.
So Hi-Tech Oil's Top Fuel, a full 8 cars in the qualifying list headed by Darren DiFillipo, but Graeme Cowin an unlikely starter for Sunday. The supercharged cars come to the line. First up, Scott Leo in the Competition Performance Commodore and Dean McLennan in the Castrol Funny Car. The Wreckers Hotline Top Comp run on a handicap system. The drivers all nominate their own handicap time. The difference is dialed into the Christmas tree starting mechanism. Then we've got a race to the other end. Dean McLennan just pointing out something to his crew there. Joining me in commentary as usual, Paul Casos. Top Comp, always plenty of action.
Plenty of action and just about to get underway as the lights run down and Scott Leo goes well. Dean McLennan, I think in a little bit of strife this time. Wait and see. Left the red light on the tree and Scott Leo an 8.06, 216 kilometres an hour for the win.
Of course, if you leave too soon, it is a red light and you lose. Adrian Christian there in the Eastern Creek Performance Holden up against Matt Abel, all the way down from Darwin for the Konica Winternationals in the Abel Tiling Services Capri. First round of Wreckers Hotline Top Comp Eliminator, and these guys have smoked in the start line at Willowbank Raceway.
All states of Australia represented here at the Konica Winternationals. Long way to tow for Matt Abel all the way from Darwin.
Adrian Christian, of course, up from Sydney, regular competitor now in this Holden. We find him in Wild Bunch at the Canberra track and, of course, at Wreckers Hotline Top Comp here at Willowbank for the Konica Winternationals. Matt Abel out in front, a little bit loose, but shootout early, gets across the line, 8.01. He's got the win.
So confidence there for Matt Abel pulling that chute so early. The next pairing now, Debbie Reed, the Reed Transport Dragster, taking on one of the colourful cars in drag racing. This is Kevin Campbell in the 34 Ford Coupe.
Debbie Reed has been running in the 6-second zone with her small block Chevy powered dragster. Here she is, picture of concentration behind the wheel. Kevin Campbell, a 7-second runner in that 34 Coupe. Pretty popular car with the ladies out here.
You couldn't get it much pinker, that's for sure. Top Comp, let's see how they go now in this first round battle.
Lights go to green. Kevin Campbell's going well.
Red light on the tree for Kev though. He's left too soon again. It was just obstructed by the starter's hut, but Debbie Reed will get the win.
Darryl Woods now in his EV Falcon, taking on a guy who's won out here at Willowbank many times. This is John Payne in his Chevy Corvette.
Payne, of course, one of the founding members of the Australian Wild Bunch Association for the supercharged sedans. Now we have two of them in this first round of Wreckers Hotline Top Comp. And Darryl Woods has been stepping up the performances in this Falcon. He's looking pretty good of recent times. John Payne there, though, he is one of the real contenders. And in fact, I think won this meeting last year.
Darryl Woods away, both green lights this time. John Payne doing the chasing, the Ford, the Corvette's coming on the bottom end. It's the Ford, Darryl Woods, 8:29, 240 kilometres an hour.
Payne was a little bit too late, and Woods' crew were pretty happy with that one. Dennis Paul now with a Keith Black Chrysler-powered dragster to take on John Moll, a real good mate of Darryl Woods'. I guess he'll be trying to make sure there's a party on in the pits tonight between those two teams.
Yeah, a variety of race cars is what makes Top Comp so exciting, and here's a good example of it, the sedan taking on the dragster.
And of course, it's this dial your own handicap system that evens it all up. The racers do qualifying, then when they get to racing, they can nominate what time they want to be handicapped on. Now, John Moll's got out fairly strongly. The dragster's got a big top end, but John Moll hangs on by about a wheel, a 786 at 253 kilometres an hour.
This is Russell Schaefer, the Caloundra Wreckers dragster, taking on Steve Swinscoe. The performance will be a Super Performance funny car.
Swinscoe, the current leader in the Wreckers Hotline Top Comp series, and there's a nice little pot of gold at the end of the series for that one. Here he comes back from his big long burnout, getting guided back in his own tyre tracks. Russell Schaefer's gone into stage. I saw both stage lights come on there, and well, Swinscoe's still in the burnout procedure. There is a 20-second rule that applies. Once a racer goes into stage, his opponent only has 20 seconds to get into the start line beam. But I have to say, Paul, staging that early isn't what you'd call too sportsmanlike at times. I see the Andrew official there with the clock watch, the stopwatch, but it looks like Swinscoe will make it.
Oh, it didn't make it. In fact, the starter has flicked the switch, and it'll be... Yes, Schaefer's going through, and will take. That will be controversial, Rob.
There'll be some discussions about that one in the pits, that's for sure. There's already some discussions on the start line there. As I say, the 20-second rule does apply, but there are some ethics that's normally followed. Morris Fabietti from Sydney in the new Pontiac Trans Am. This is a brand new race car.
Taking on Dave Wallace, the Brisbane Driveshaft Holden Commodore. Yeah, what a difficult race meeting, in fact, to debut a new car. But Morris Fabietti been around drag racing for a long time, and what a really smooth-looking machine under the lights here tonight at Willowbank.
Well, last year we saw him, I think, go to the quarter or semi-finals in Top Comp Eliminator at the Konica Winternationals. That time, though, he was driving Steve Turner's Nostalgia Dragster. This time, a sleek Pontiac, the American body car, up against, as we say, Dave Wallace in this Brisbane Drive Shafts and Balancing Service big block Chevy-powered Calais. And you've got to give it to Dave Wallace. He really does present this car well. We're, of course, in the Nestle Night of Thunder at the Konica Winternationals.
And watching the tree run down there and both getting green lights. Dave Wallace is going well. Morris Fabietti, who's going to get there first? It's Fabietti, 7:29, 244 kilometres an hour.
Wreckers Hotline Top Comp, a full 16-car field. Tom Coonan, the next one out in the Holtz Crane Hire car. And how about this BMW for Alfie Sabello? Beautiful car up from Sydney.
Yeah, the preparation of all our race cars here at Willowbank Raceway is just of the highest order, but just take a look at the detail here on this BMW.
Well, both of these cars shining examples of what Top Comp Eliminator is all about. A big engine for Alfie Sabello, and Tommy Coonan, on the other hand, he's just got a small block Chevy, but the detail inside Sabello's BMW, it is just a beautiful race car.
And our cameras there, Wreckers Hotline Drag Racing 98 cameras getting in nice and close. Well, both of these cars are staged. The lights go to green. Tommy Coonan's going well. Tom Coonan in the Ford LTD. Here comes the BMW. It's the Ford. Tom Coonan, 774, 276 kilometres an hour.